So hello everybody, welcome to Gravity Drank, and I brought in someone to interview for once, because usually I'm still a new channel, so I haven't gotten too many people, but I decided to get someone who was close, at least in proximity to me, someone who's also in a certain group that I'm in, the Podcast Beyond Facebook group. So this is Eden, Rohatensky?
Rohatensky, yeah.
Rohatensky. So hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. So thanks for doing this interview.
Sure.
I wanted to get I'll do some of the groundwork for you. So Eden's from Canada. In the moment, she's living in Canada. And she does a lot of things. She's a developer, a designer, a musician, and also a speaker. So, Eden, you have a lot on your track record. I believe how old are you, 22, 23?
I'm 22.
Okay,
Yeah.
wow. You've done a lot. And presumably, are you still in college?
I'm doing my last year at university here. Yeah, we usually call them universities, but yeah, I'm doing my last year. It's like my 5th year because I went part-time because I was doing so much other stuff, but I'm pretty much done a degree in computer science.
Computer science. So, yeah. I know you do a lot of... Well, before I get into that, let me just do a quick... Why don't you introduce a little bit of yourself? What do you think people should know about you that... just a quick synopsis on Eden. How do you like to pitch me on you?
Well, my name is Eden, and I am a developer and a designer. I've been working in that field since I was 13. I started freelancing around then. I am also a public speaker. I go around Canada right now, and I talk about web development and design. And I also organize a lot of events, and I'm a front woman for a band called Eden and Escrow. And
named by you.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny with our band, like, I started by myself, and then we slowly added members, so we kind of wanted to maintain my name in there just so that people kind of knew, hey, we're still playing the same music, just with more people as part of it. So that's kind of why it's got the very egotistical name.
Is that why? Was it just Eden for a while?
Well, it was my full name. It was Eden Rohatensky, which nobody could pronounce anyways.
Or Google.
And then my guitarist, Jerry Shen, he joined the band. And so we went under Eden Rohatensky, and then he just accompanied me. And we released the EP, Hobbies. And then we added, about a year later after releasing the EP, we decided we wanted to do a full-length album. And we recruited our bassist, Cassandra Lestel, and our drummer, Ryan Bennett, to come join us. And now we're playing as a full band, and we decided that it's probably better to go under a new name because A, people can't pronounce my name, and B, give the others a little bit of recognition. So we came up with Eden and Escrow.
A little recognition. We'll give them a word. What's escrow exactly? Am I not popular? Do I not know Is that a term of some sort, or is it something you made up?
Well, it's like a banking term, so it's kind of like if your house, I believe, if your house goes back to the bank, it's in escrow, right? So, and that could be completely wrong, but we wanted a financial term.
That could be completely... All right.
Yeah, so that's how I understand it. But we wanted a financial term because this next album we're doing, that's going to release in April. A lot of it's about, working and money, and I don't have that many love songs, so most of my songs are about money and stuff like that, so we decided that was probably the most appropriate kind of message to put in the band name.
So, you do a lot of financial talking in your... I haven't heard a lot of songs.
I talk a lot about money in my music, and I talk a lot about, working and, just life priorities. And this next album is it's kind of a sequel, I guess, to my first EP. It's called the upcoming one is going to be called Work, and the last one was called Hobby. So, and then there's another one planned for after that that's not announced yet. But it does have a theme of career and money and working and setting relationships aside for that kind of dream job or whatever you want. And it's kind of what we decided to do, and because I was writing those songs for over a year and a half, that's kind of where we decided to go with the band name.
Oh, so it's a recent name. It wasn't.
Yeah, it's we decided on Eden and Escrow once we started recording the album, and we started recording the album before we played any shows together, actually, like as a full band. And then we re-released Hobbies under that name recently through all the digital distribution, so now you can get Hobbies on Spotify and RDO and iTunes and all that stuff, and it's under Eden and Escrow now.
All right, I was about to ask you where you can find your music. In Hobbies, is that your recent album or the upcoming one? Is it the
Hobbies,
EP or the...
Yeah, that's the EP, and it was actually originally released October 26th of last year, and we re-released it about a month ago digitally, so you can get it pretty much anywhere if you look.
So just look up Eden and Escrow on RDO, Spotify, and all the above. All right, that's good.
Yeah.
I was impressed by how you managed to balance a lot of things like you do. You're still in school, I believe, right? You have the band, you have dev talks, and then obviously you're probably still learning more on development. And speaking on the development side, what type of designer and or developer are you? Because I know you wrote designer in your portfolio, but I want to know if they come hand in hand, or do you do separate parts of a job?
Well, my day job, I work on a mobile app and I work primarily as a designer in my day job, UX UI. I was previously working on the web development side and just kind of moved around and have a fairly fluid existence at my current job. I do freelancing, and when I do freelancing, it's mostly web development, and that's mostly what I talk about is web development, particularly optimizing for mobile, so responsive web design and all that stuff. And because I'm working with responsive web design, it's really useful to have that design background on top of the development background, because you can talk a lot more about design principles and content flow and all of that stuff when you have an idea of both. I also experiment in other types of development because I am a computer science major, so you kind of try to be a little bit more generic, I think, than a lot of non-computer science majors. So I've had interest. I'm kind of learning Unity right now, and I'm kind of doing all this other stuff just to kind of keep my brain going and really understand what I'm doing.
Yeah, I downloaded Unity a few weeks ago, and then I reminded myself how much I don't know about that world. But so you got a computer science degree. What made you branch out more into designer, the designer related part of web design?
I started making websites when I was 12 or 13, really early. I was playing Neopets a lot, and they had this part of their website called guilds where you could customize your guild and design it with HTML, and they didn't have CSS yet. And that was how you got people to join your guild, and people could only join one guild. So I learned how to make really pretty guilds, which were essentially HTML sites.
Yeah.
And
so you built
so I started doing that, and then my dad, who's also a developer, I told him about that, and he's like, well, do you want your own website? So he gave me some space on his server, and I started building my own website. It was actually fairly well designed, surprisingly, even looking back on it, but it was just full of the worst content ever. It was like, I had a page that was a guest book, and then I had a page about opinions, where I had an opinion on stereotypes, and I think that's the only one I ever wrote. And I had a little bio, and when you're 12, you haven't really accomplished anything, so it was the worst bio ever.
I'm 12. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I remember I was going through like the goth phase, so I like the header image was like my eye and it was glowing and my hair was in my face and then there was a picture of a mask and a
And this is on
wig.
the Neo. Oh no, it's not on Neopets. This is on your
No, this is
personal.
on my dad's
Picture
poster.
that on the Neopets site.
Yeah. And so I started doing that so I was doing kind of Photoshop work and web development, just static sites all together at once, and then I kept doing that, and then I started freelancing, making websites for people. I actually used to work as a tech saleswoman, and I would always go and poach the customers that went into the WYSIWYG aisle where they had like all the software for building your own website.
They had a
and be like,
WYSIWYG
hey.
aisle?
Well, we had like a section of just like WYSIWYG website editors,
Okay, wow.
and it was weird, but I would just like grab them and be like, hey, I can build a website for you.
Don't buy this. You should just hire me. You're on the inside.
Yeah.
You're on the inside.
Yes. So I did that, and then I started having like clients and doing all that while I was growing up, and did that throughout high school. And then I kind of got to the point that I had to decide, well, do I want to go to here? Probably go to like more of a tech school for design, or do I want to go to university and get a full-on degree? And at the time, I actually went into engineering. Electronic systems engineering, and I decided I didn't want to do that because there's a lot of math and a lot of physics, and there's still a lot of math in computer science, but it's less calculus, and I don't like calculus.
It's always fun
like
when you're taking calculus in high school and you realize you're just at the tip of mathematics. Like it's just this crazy mountain of theories and knowledge.
Yeah, so I went into computer science finally and didn't turn back. But at the same time, when I was in my second year of university, I got a job as a designer at Gas Buddy, and that's where I'm still working. So I've been developing my designer skills in the field rather than at school, and at the same time, I've been working on getting my computer science degree and learning how to be a good developer, and really just kind of learning those two things side by side.
Yeah, and that's a really rare ability. Yeah, so many people go crazy over people who can design and develop. Luckily, because you started at such a young age with such a good eye, it looks like you're branching out into both. People call those unicorns in the dev world.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
It's funny, I had an interview at one point, like a job interview, and they told me that they were looking for a developer that didn't smell like Cheetos, and that I would fit that role perfectly. It was like the weirdest thing, because people have such weird terms for what they basically non-socially awkward developers, whereas I think that's a huge stereotype. But
that's a really weird stereotype.
So
smells like Cheetos.
Yeah,
like, that doesn't sound that hard to bypass. Like,
yeah.
As long as you shower before.
Yeah.
That is a little weird.
Yeah.
Not even going to comment on that. But so you do a lot of design and development, and you have started to speak out more on it. I believe you've recently started speaking at conferences, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I started speaking at conferences actually in October of last year. And ever since then I've done, I think, 10 conferences in total. And I have more planning are upcoming, so I've been really busy with speaking and
10 in a
speaking
year.
about ones. Yeah, in a year.
Nice.
So
good start.
That's actually been like a super interesting journey, because like I started at a conference called Prairie DevCon. I started complaining on Twitter because it had no female speakers, and so my friend and also the organizer, two separate people, they decided to harass me and basically tell me, if you're going to call out people, then maybe you should do it, because we had no female applicants. So that's how I got into speaking, was complaining on Twitter.
Nice.
And
there you
haven't
go.
looked back.
Pro tip. Pro tip. Go to a conference, find something missing, and complain. But that's really interesting that there weren't a lot of female applicants to begin with. It's not like they were filtering them out.
Yeah, in some cases they do get filtered out. In some cases, women won't apply because they don't feel welcome. You know, when you're speaking, especially like a girl my age, most of the speakers are at least 30 years old and they're male, and it's intimidating.
You're a youngin'.
So a lot of... What?
You're a youngin'. You're 22.
And I was 20 when I started, right? So I just turned 22. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of one of those things where people are intimidated, so they don't know that they're welcome, so why would they apply if they don't feel that way? And so it's kind of one of those chicken and egg things where you need the applicants to come in, but you also kind of need to reach out to applicants and make sure that those women and people of color and people of different sexualities feel welcome into the conferences.
I see. And now that you're speaking at these conferences, what are you speaking about at the conferences? Are they different types of conferences, or are your topics the same? Or tell me more about that.
Well, for most of the more technical conferences, I talk about responsive web design. I talk about LESS and SAS, so that's object-oriented CSS. For those who don't know, and well, it's not really object-oriented; it's more just pre-composed.
Got everyone, everyone angry now.
Oh no! And then I'm also speaking on just like client-side optimization, so mostly front-end development, just because that's what I have the most experience in. But then I also go to more business conferences and marketing conferences, and I talk about communication between developers and designers. I talk about prototyping, and I talk about things like that maybe grab a larger audience outside of, you know, the designer dev world, to just kind of give some insight from my position being, you know, in multiple positions.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And I know recently you've been speaking at more... You did something with Girls Geek Dinners, and is that the proper? Let me just check. Yeah, right.
Girl Geek Dinners. Yeah. So in the city I live in, Regina, I started the chapter of Girl Geek Dinners, and we had our first dinner in late November, and it was a huge success. I say sold out, but we gave the tickets away for free and had a really good conversation. But, you know, it's good to get everybody out there.
That is good. It's important. I know San Francisco did a lot of those types of coding things, but when I went, it was definitely, well, it makes... I can understand why Girl Geek Dinners exist and what they're trying to promote.
Yeah.
And, well, have you been to San Francisco?
Once I drove through it on my way to Mexico, I think.
That sounds like an interesting story already, but...
well, when I was 13, I used to be part of an evangelical church. I'm atheist now, but... and we went on a mission trip to Mexico, so we had like 45 people on a bus, and that included me and a bunch of my friends with none of our parents, and a bunch of people from the church, and we went to Mexico and built a house.
Oh, yeah, I forget churches do stuff like that. They go to random places and help out. But, you know.
Yeah, it was a good experience, even though I'm not part of the church anymore and stuff. But
it's a good experience.
Got a lot of stories from that.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring that part up more about the Girl Geek Dinners, because I did want to move into the gaming related stuff. So I found you actually through the Facebook group, the Podcast Beyond Facebook group. You just started posting random stuff, spamming the group with your crazy articles. Look how important I am. So no, but in all seriousness, no, that's not what you're doing. But in all seriousness, it's good that you do that because it gets them talking about stuff. Especially when you talked about Anita that one time. A lot of comments were on that one, but we'll stay on. We'll stay off that for a minute. So I did want to talk about, you do like games. You're in the Podcast Beyond group that I'm assuming you listen to Podcast Beyond. So how did you get into, how long have you been, playing, do you play video games a lot? Is it a big part of your life, or?
Yeah, it's a huge part of my life. I mean, I think it was an NES. My memory of it is extremely foggy when I first started playing video games, and then my parents got divorced, and I lived with my mom, and she wouldn't let us get consoles because she thought it was pointless because we had the PC. So I started playing PC games a little bit more, and then when I went to visit my dad, he also didn't have a console, so I started playing PC games even more heavily when I was at my dad's. So I started playing Doom and Return to Castle Wolfenstein and all those kinds of games. And that was
Wolfenstein
kind
3D. Have you played that was a great one.
yeah, it was pretty good. And so it was actually really funny because those were my first video games, and that's kind of where my memory started. And then I started getting into N64 simulators and really enjoyed, Harvest Moon 64, and started playing Mario Party and games like that. And then I started getting interested in, Sims games and all that kind of stuff. And then I started dating somebody that I'm no longer dating, and he was listening to GameScoop on a regular basis, and he introduced me to GameScoop. He was also a big console gamer. He had everything, so I got kind of introduced into that stuff, into the Wii, into the Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and all that stuff. Then we broke up, and I was still listening to IGN podcasts,
Nice.
And I started branching out into that stuff, and because I was getting into computer science, I started becoming extremely interested in the industry, almost more so than I was at that particular time than I was in actually gaming. I was just interested in the industry. My love of gaming returned to me after I was kind of learning more about it, and now I play a lot of PlayStation and a lot of iOS games and a lot of PC games still.
Mm-hmm. So when you say you were really interested in the industry, do you mean like the development part of the gaming industry, or
just the overall thing? Like I was really interested in like less so reviews of games and more so editorials about games. I found that really interesting. I found the whole business side of the video game industry interesting. I found obviously development interesting, journalism, voice acting I was really interested in, and soundtracks. And because I am one of those people that likes to do everything, I found that video games really encompassed, my love of development and design and music and all that stuff. So
yeah, no, especially when you see just how much design thought is gone into every game, level design, UI design, all that stuff. It's incredible. It gets even more incredible when you find out if a game's made by 1,000 people or like a few people. For example, I recently found out Pokemon was made by 4 people.
What?
Yeah, the original Pokemon was developed by 4 people.
Wow.
Yep. So think about that. Just think of all the data, all the different... It's pretty incredible that happened.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. And you're playing now on the PlayStation and your Mac, like your simple Apple apps, simple Apple games, mobile games. Sorry, I had a brain freeze for a second. But does this relate to... I know you're on a podcast, the 36 Man podcast.
Yeah.
What is that about? Like, how did that start? Is that even related to... It's kind of about games? What... Give me
very much so about games.
Give me a better synopsis. Because I listened to the last episode, the one with Alexis, I believe.
Yeah.
So give a synopsis about what that is about.
So we're going to be recording our 5th episode today, and the 36 Man, it started kind of... Jimmy Champagne and I became friends via Twitter through kind of the Beyond group and stuff, and then I was doing Eden Does Stuff, which is my daily vlog, which is restarting in the new year, and...
What do you mean restarting? It's doing...
I haven't been posting very much content over the past couple of weeks because of how busy I was with finals and everything. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm kind of recording a lot of episodes and then editing them so that I have a backlog. So if I don't have time during a day, I don't have to worry about it and miss a day. So giving myself a little bit of a buffer. So I was doing Music Monday and I hadn't written a song. And usually if I haven't written a song, I do a cover, and I told Jimmy, I have no idea what I should do for a cover. So he said, you should cover Life in 24 Life in 24 Frames Bitter End. And
I saw that.
So I did. And then Greg picked it up, and then Chris saw it. And Chris actually, once Jimmy recommended it, he gave me the chords, he gave me the lyrics, he gave me everything so that I could do it really easily, which I was super grateful for. And then a bunch of, the IGN guys saw it. And then we decided, hey, well, maybe if we're all kind of interested in this stuff, we should start doing a podcast. And Chris had been podcasting under the name 36 Men a few years ago, and he stopped. He was actually podcasting with our other host, Anthony, and just due to life circumstances, they stopped. So we decided, okay, we're going to do this, and me and Jimmy and Chris started the podcast, and now Anthony's joining back in, and so that's kind of where it came from. And we're all musicians, and we're all interested in games, so it's really about video games and music. And last week we had Alexis, and this week we have Arlen Schafel from Noodle Cake Games. So we're trying to really balance it between developers of games and people who write about games or talk about games on a regular basis, and really have interesting guests. And so far it's going all right.
So far you got someone from IGN and a developer, so yeah, pretty good for a fifth episode. So good job there. It got my attention. And I'm definitely going to try to listen on that. I think there's a lot of podcasts in that Podcast Beyond group. Has like the Middle of Nowhere Gaming podcast. I don't even know if that's the proper name for it. Then
there's a lot of podcasts I think that inspired a lot of people.
Yeah, and the MyGN group has even more. That's a really big group of people. So that's really cool that you do that, and we're just trying to spread the love of games and music. Actually, if you're interested, the Retronauts podcast had a music one just a few weeks ago. So if you want to look that up, Retronauts. It has Jeremy Parrish and from 1UP, well, formerly of 1UP, and a few other people who very well versed in like retro games. They do a really cool music one, so if you're interested in music, that's definitely something you should check out.
I'll do that.
Yeah. So, now that we got the gaming part and the development part of your life under wraps, I did want to talk about this a bit. So, and I really got the idea when I saw your Anita Sarkeesian video. Can you hear that? Can you hear the cops?
Yeah.
I live in a good...
talking about Anita Sarkeesian, they're coming to get you.
They're ready. They're already here. So, I don't want to talk about Anita. I want to talk more about feminism in popular culture / video games, pop culture. And, guys, I already said I'm not talking about Anita, but let me just wait for that. Okay. So, and the fact that you're already doing certain things in the development world for that. So wait, let's dive into the background of that. I think you mentioned before that you were a feminist, correct?
Yes, I am.
Do you do anything so what do you do to promote or try to spread the word on that? Do you do
Well, I do talk about it a lot in my blog, and I did the episode about Anita Sarkeesian and my views on her stuff, but I am the chapter lead in Regina of Ladies Learning Code, so making sure that women and men learn about how to code and all that stuff. And I also run Girl Geek dinners, and that's really just to promote getting more women into tech, getting more men and others, or women even, getting more men or others interested in kind of the issues involving, women being in tech, other sexualities being in tech, because you'll notice that there's not that many, gay people or transgender people in tech, even less so than women, and same with a lot of, racial minorities.
Yeah.
So that's, I talk about it a lot, and I try to encourage women that I know. I mentor a few younger or sometimes older people that are kind of thinking about getting an education about, getting into computer science or getting into web development or anything like that. And that's kind of where I lie, is, try to make those issues talked about, and also trying to help specific people into getting into the industry and, you know, try to encourage that.
Right. And I think Girl Geek Dinners, or Girls Who Code, I went to their website and saw the percentage of girls who actually show an interest in computer science in middle school, as opposed to the percentage drops drastically in high school of girls who actually continue wanting that. And your point about playing Neopets and doing the guild stuff reminds me of how many girls, when I was 13, were on MySpace and Zanga, and they were all just throwing code all over the place so they can have like awesome sparkle effects. It really reminds me of that era where only girls were doing it at that time. None of my guy friends were using it, and how much that dropped off in high school, where all of a sudden I didn't see girls doing anything with code anymore.
Yeah.
So it is interesting to see that drop off happen, and what could be, you know, there's so many variables that can cause a change like that. So you were we have a lot of groups there are a lot of groups in the dev community that we mentioned, you know, Ladies Learning Code and Girls Who Code, who actually try to promote more women in the development workforce. And I wanted to ask you if you think there's a reason why that's almost non-existent in pop culture in terms of video games and the like. Why, before Anita even kind of came around, there wasn't really anything to rally behind against, if you were for that, besides Gail Simone for comics and such. Do you think there could be a reason for that?
So part of it is that if we have not that many women making video games, and we have not that many women, you know, creating those characters and those stories, then there's going to be less of an influence from a feminine perspective. So, and at the same time, when I was a kid, it was a lot of the people that, you know, became computer scientists or developers now were those kids that were actively playing video games all the time. And so you kind of have this whole thing where if girls aren't interested in playing the video games that we're making today, that they might not want to make video games later in the future. What's inspiring them? And you also have the whole thing where if girls aren't making video games, then they don't have an influence on how those games are being written and how those games are being developed and what kind of characters and stories and level design and gameplay we have. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a whole, you know, circular issue. So what was I? So what I think is that if you have communities like Ladies Learning Code and Girls Who Code and Girl Geek Dinners, then you're going to see, as more women get into developing, you might see more feminine influence on gaming, and in such, more girls might be more likely to play more popular video games besides, you know, casual gaming. And on top of that, I think that, like, Girl Geek Dinners, the whole idea with Girl Geek Dinners is it's not just about developers, it's about anybody who's somewhat influenced by geek culture or by the tech industry or is interested in comic books or anything like that, that feels that they're a minority or notices that there is a minority, because Girl Geek Dinners more than welcomes men and everybody else.
Yeah, it's not excluding. It's trying to bring about equality, not saying like man was totally wrong this whole time. Screw them. Yeah,
exactly. And that's like another huge thing is that when I did the Anita Sarkeesian video, and I had a crap load of trolls and people angry just because I talked about her in a, I think, balanced way. And, you know, you get all these people that say, oh, feminists hate men. Feminists do not hate men. They love men for the most part. They're just acknowledging that there's been, you know, a little bit of a divide, and that there's women that could do a lot more with themselves if there wasn't that divide.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot more to it than simple answers like, let's just make a game with a female protagonist. I think it's much, much bigger on a pop culture level Like Colin Moriarty mentioned that Sony Santa Monica, which makes God of War games, has a lot of female developers. Now I can't check, I can't go in there myself. I've tried looking for that data, but going off of Colin's information as a credited IGN source, if we think about that, it makes, you know, God of War games have a lot of like scenes where Kratos just has sex with women and kills them and nudity with them, and I'm sure they're happy making the games. I'm sure they're not like, damn, I hate making. But it does bring in more about like the higher ups, the people who are making decisions to make the games. Let's make a God of War game, and maybe whoever the director, whoever decided to put those parts in, you know, for marketing reasons or for all sorts of reasons. You know, the whole thing with the Fem Shep thing about how having, there's so many things behind all the reasons why things might happen because of marketing. So I'm not going to dive into that, but there it is, I feel like, a bigger, it's so many things happening.
Yeah,
where it's not just one simple, let's just do this, fixed. It is like, it is much bigger. And that's why it spans out into movies, it spans out into games and comics, you know. I tried doing that thing where you watch a movie and try finding two women talking to each other about something that isn't men. It's pretty bad, actually. I was so surprised by how I couldn't. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly hard.
Yeah, and now that, you know, video games are becoming more and more cinematic, and a lot of video games are even being based off comic books, there's going to be huge influences from the history that exists there. And so when we have, you know, awesome games that really have great female characters, I think we really need to celebrate them and say that this is what we want, because, you know, if we, and that happened with The Last of Us. Ellie was an awesome character from my view, and if we show and we buy these games, and as Colin also says, speak with your wallet, then you're going to see a shift. And when people start seeing that they can make money while not, you know, objectifying and or treating a certain gender less, in a lesser way, then we'll start to see a change in the industry. But it is a business, and the history has shown that it's been primarily male gamers that like this, but that's changing. So hopefully we'll see new storylines, because that's and new gameplay, because that's the other thing, is that games have been around for a while, and in order to evolve gameplay and evolve storytelling, we need to evolve our point of view with, you know, modern and maybe more open ideas.
Yeah, and I actually wrote a piece when I was working for Bitmob. When I was an intern at Bitmob a few years ago, and I wrote a piece when Uncharted 3 came out. Spoilers if you haven't played Uncharted 3.
I haven't.
Do you care about this?
I probably won't get through it yet. No.
Well, this doesn't...
It's okay.
Quick spoilers if you
it.
haven't played Uncharted 3. At the start of the game, so this is the start. Skip the next 2 minutes. I'll put a marker. Basically, I thought Nathan Drake was Hispanic because of something that happens at the start of the game where he is, and a quick revelation into his childhood made me think he was Hispanic. And something later in the game, and I don't think most people got this, I think most people were like, oh, whatever. But to me, when I saw a certain thing happen and where he was, I was like, is Drake, is he Colombian? And then later, and it made me feel really like, oh, wow, Drake's Colombian. Now, I know people shouldn't care about that type of stuff, but when your culture is different from another culture, for example, like I'm Peruvian and I have a more Hispanic culture, we celebrate Christmas differently, we do different things. It is nice to see someone else who is also part of that culture. It has nothing to do with the color of your skin, but more of like, hey, that guy might have lived the way I lived growing up. And that's what people connect to, not like color of your skin, not that stupid stuff. I don't care. Spanish people are white. They go all the way to spectrum. Argentinians are super white compared to Dominican Republicans who are much darker. But yeah, I thought Nathan Drake was Hispanic for a good portion of the game. I was hoping. And then later on, I found out, nope, I was wrong. So I wrote a piece on that, on Bitmob, and how it made me realize just how there are no Spanish characters in games. There's very few. The most I have is Blanca and Vega from Street Fighter, which is terrible because that game uses stereotypes to make their characters. I'm not blaming them for that, but that's literally all I had growing up. I remember being a kid playing Street Fighter, and I was like, Brazil, that's right next to Peru, and I'm like, awesome, I'm a green monster. So it made me realize there's just little choices for that too. I know there's a lot of people talking about more African Americans in video games, and slowly I'm like, well, it could be more of everything in video games. Don't forget.
Yeah.
I met with what were you saying?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that it's like a lot of the times, like maybe early on when I was just kind of discovering, these issues, I focused a lot on, women, just women in general, but then you notice, okay, well, when's the last time you saw a gay person in a video game that wasn't completely, made fun of? Right. Or when's the last time you saw, Hispanic, and at the time, other racial minorities and all that stuff, maybe even majorities, or even, like a Filipino person. I have not seen a Filipino person in a video game ever, I don't think.
Is there a war in the Philippines in any game?
No.
That's the only way I can think of. I have a lot of Filipino friends, and yeah, they've mentioned that to me.
So, I mean, that's one of the things that's really important to me now that I'm involved in these issues and that I speak out against these issues is that, it's not just women, it's not just racial minorities, and in some cases, white, straight dudes are portrayed really shittily.
Yeah.
They're portrayed as being, only capable of thinking about violence and sex, and I don't think that if I told a white dude, hey, that's all you're capable of thinking of, that'd be okay. And that's problematic.
Yeah, there's so many different types of personalities that we forget. We look so much about the we look at so much of the visual parts of something and forget about okay, it's a white dude, so but what type of dude is he? What is he? Angry? Is he happy? Is he what? It reminds me of how so many popular games have a kind of bald, shaved head, strong guy, but their personalities are so bland. There's just a general lack of personality in a lot of video games. It spans a lot of. There's so many people, and I understand that they want to fill you in that position. They're like, it's a first-person shooter. It should feel like you're this person. But in all honesty, I don't feel like there's any person which maybe that's what they want, but it does get a little bland why is that the norm? Why is a shaved head the norm?
Somewhat scraggly beard, usually brunette, muscular, wearing brown clothes.
That is why I love Half-Life. Half-Life is the only game where as you're waiting in the first Half-Life when you're chilling in the trans system, they tell you, this is your name, Gordon Freeman. By the way, you're an MIT graduate, so congratulations. And you got glasses, you got you do have a beard, you do have short hair, but you have glasses. So the only first-person shooter I can think of where the character has glasses. So
yeah, I mean, I can understand why they would choose a character to be kind of the, fittest person to, defeat a zombie apocalypse would not need glasses.
Yeah.
I can understand.
But what if you were just screwed up and had glasses? Then you have to live with it.
Well, what happens if a zombie eats your glasses?
Why would he choose to eat the glasses?
Because they smell like you.
That's true.
They're on your face all day.
Right. But I'm a big fan of Half-Life. That's why I bring it up.
I love Half-Life too.
Yeah. Good game. Alex Vance, first video game crush. So gonna lay that out on the table. Half-Life is a good game. So there you go. And she saved your butt a lot in the game. She only needs saving once throughout the Half-Life series. But she saved...
Yeah. That's another thing, too. I did that video about, like, Anita's damsel in distress, and a lot of people were talking about, okay, well, what's wrong with saving people? And what's wrong with, like, feeling bad for somebody and saving them? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the frequency that happens where, like, a dude has to save a lady. The lady cannot save herself. And I thought that Half-Life actually, they balanced that really well. It's okay to have girls in danger in video games. It's just when it's always girls in danger needing to be saved from the exact same storyline, that's where it's problematic because it's boring.
Yeah, and the way you save Alex is interesting too, because she's in your arms. You have her. She's just kind of comatose, but
yeah.
And she does save you first, so you're repaying a favor.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second you meet her. But yeah, that's a big thing too. And speaking of all these personalities and damsels in distress and just that, and the reason I bring up personalities and white bald dudes is because I did see that trope of having the woman in a group being the personality. So, for example, the Smurfette principle, where you have all these different personalities. There's someone who's like, Pop Smurf and all the other Smurfs. They all one has Brainy has the glasses. Everyone has different personalities, and then you just have Smurfette, where she's just a girl. Like, there's no personality. That's just it. That is her. You see, and why can't... So that's what the Smurfette principle is that there's... Instead of having various girls that are... One is brainy, one is this, one is that. All of the default... They all default to men first, and then you throw in the girl, and that is her personality. It's the same with...
There's your diversity.
Yeah. It's the same for cultural diversity too. They throw in a Spanish person and that's his, or a black person and that's what he is. He's the black one. It's not like, here's a bunch of black people. This one's a thug. This one's, they can go so crazy with the stereotypes, but instead they choose to just throw in one black guy, one Spanish guy, one girl, and that does happen a lot in games too. It's on all levels, not just females, on all levels. And then you throw in the one white guy who's just the main character who has no personality.
That happens in real life too. It's like Etsy had an interesting talk, I think it was around last year, about their hiring process and how they redid it. And what they ended up doing was bringing in a bunch of people to hacker school where they would teach, the skills, and then they kind of monitor them, and then they'd hire on the best ones. And this increased their diversity by a huge amount in terms of, every minority that you could think of. And the one thing that they had is that women, in particular, women in groups in the workplace, if they were the only woman, they were seen as, just the woman in the group. They weren't seen as, a colleague of, just like the normal colleague. They were seen as your female colleague. Whereas once they had more than one woman in a group, they saw them as, just colleagues, and it wasn't a big deal that there was a female in the group. So that really affects that. Like, it's being the female is a huge I don't like that, personally, for me.
It happens a lot. It happens in the workforce. You've been in development for a long time. How often have you been the only girl throughout your life?
Until about 6 months ago.
Wow.
Period.
So that was your life until 6 months.
And I mean, that's not just being a developer. I grew up in a smaller town, and I was in French immersion, so I was for kindergarten through grade 12, I was in a classroom with just me and all dudes, and that was just the way it worked out. I don't think that there's a particularly, gender difference between males and females in French immersion in Canada, but it's just the way it worked out. So I was always the only girl, and that's just how it was. And that's why I think for me, it took me a long time to notice that I was the only girl when I was selling computers. I was the only girl when I was doing this and that. And now that's kind of why I care about it a lot, too.
Mm-hmm. I can never understand that world completely because I never lived through it. I can kind of relate, but not completely. So it is a big difference, you know. Me being like a pretty. Most people think I'm like from Europe or something, and don't consider me Hispanic till I speak Spanish. So I've always been just grouped with the other guys, or just grouped with the others. So I never felt any of that. Like some of my friends, I am friends with other Hispanic people in my area, and they look actually like you can tell they're from like Guatemala and such. And they'd feel more like that when they're in groups of largely white or largely other cultures. So that is interesting to go through something like that growing up.
Yeah, and again, like I would not change a thing in my past. I loved everybody that I went to school with. I loved the people that I work with. I love the people that I work with now. But it's something you notice, and there's issues involving it. Like, there's stuff that women go through that men don't, and then there's like a big communication difference because of that, and vice versa. And there's also like the whole thing. It's like that whole idea of being a guy's girl. Like, I like sports and I like video games and I like programming and all that stuff, but that doesn't make me a guy's girl. It makes me somebody who's interested in that.
Just happen to like that, yeah. And games have changed a long way. We have progressed. There's just other problems now. I remember in the early 90s, if you were a girl, a lot of things were sold to you being a girl. Like, I remember a lot of Game Boy games, like the Angelica Rugrats games, would say game girl with a little arrow, like, buy this. This is for you. You're a girl. I remember Barbie games, Rugrat, Angelica games.
When I got my first, this was like a huge memory for me for video games, is like one Christmas, I have a brother, and he got a lime green Game Boy Color, and I got a pink Game Boy Color, even though I didn't like pink, but whatever. And Landon, my brother, got Pokemon Gold.
You got Pokemon Pink? Did you?
I got Mary-Kate and Ashley's platformer. So I played it. It was dumb, but
it's comparable. Pokemon Gold with Mary-Kate and Ashley.
I remember like going into. I talked about this in the podcast. I used to go and steal Pokemon Gold from Landon at night, and like once he was asleep, he's younger than me. Play it, and because I couldn't save, because I would save over his save,
right.
I would restart Pokemon Gold every night for like a few months, and now I just can't play Pokemon anymore because it's that beginning task is just too much.
Oh my god! Yeah, and Gold is one of the better ones. The end game, because you fight all the. I won't spoil it. Won't spoil it.
Played the scene with the doctor at the beginning over and over again.
Got those Slowpoke tails.
Yep.
That's all I remember. Wow. That must have hurt. and you still see that with the Imagine series Ubisoft did a few years for the DS, you know?
Yeah.
I think that kind of died out. I don't work at GameStop anymore, so I don't see just how many games. When I worked at GameStop back in 2007, 8, definitely saw what was catered to either kids or girls as it came through. We had tons of the Pet series, tons of the Imagine babies, a lot of fashion designer ones. You could tell what they were for. And I don't know if that's as popular anymore because it's expensive to develop for games. 3DS games and Vita games. But I think you still see them in the mobile area.
Oh, yeah. And Facebook games.
So they just moved over. It's cheaper there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like, there were so many fashion and just ridiculous stupid Facebook
Face shit.
Facebook games that I've been invited to that is just like, oh my god, no. But I mean, recently, I guess like with the Wii, we had Cooking Mama, which
It's pretty good.
was
I
a
hear.
fun game, but it was pretty obvious what it was targeted to.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have as many like,
Where's the chef?
I guess, yeah.
Where's the guy?
We don't have as many. We don't have as many gendered video games on like PlayStation and stuff that I've noticed. But like, I miss when they had, you know, cooperative gameplay was like a really popular thing, because that's what I enjoy. I don't want to go and kill my boyfriend in video games, even though that's fun sometimes. I'd rather play co-op with him. Like, we play co-op Call of Duty multiplayer all the time together, and we played The Cave together. But there's less gameplay that I think maybe people with more feminine attributes would be interested in. So, for example, like, they did a study, I can't remember where or when, where a lot of the women were more interested in video games that didn't have violence in them. So it's really interesting. It'd be really interesting to see gameplay that's maybe not a puzzle game, or in some cases a simulation game, where we're able to see, you know, how did you get through this story by communicating with people? How did you barter with them? How did you deal with people without, you know, slashing their throat?
Oh.
So I hope we see that a lot more too, in terms of maybe not gendered. I don't want to see gendered video games because those are just as boring as excessively violent games to me. But I would like to see how we kind of focus on maybe less machoism and less, you know, less machoism and maybe more of those other attributes that could be explored for story and gameplay.
Yeah, let's get some Harvard graduates in there. Why just MIT with Gordon Freeman? Should have all these. But no, I love that you brought up co-op games, because I'm a huge... I grew up on Sonic 2, and that's the ultimate troll game for co-op, because Tails can die, Sonic can just not... If you think Super Mario 3D World and Rayman Legends and that Behemoth game that came out are troll games for co-op, you have to play Sonic 2 for the Genesis, because that's ultimate troll. Especially Sonic 3, because Tails can just fly, grab Sonic and kill him. Sonic can just leave Tails behind. But I grew up on that, and I do miss co-op games a lot. That's why I actually actively look for co-op games, because that was how I got into games, was cooperatively. I would have never played games if it wasn't for co-op. I got Twisted Metal recently. I still love that game. It's more on the violent side, but it's still good.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with violent video games. I'm perfectly fine with that. I just would love to see new stuff. I think everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
We all want to just see innovation in games. We want to play new things.
No, I think so too. So thank you. And
Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I think we hit a good mark. We covered a lot of topics, so thank you for coming out and talking. I hope we sparked an interesting conversation that you thought was good.
Yeah, it did.
So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you can like, comment, or subscribe on what you thought. Don't get so angry that she wasn't against Anita. Let's not get all trolly. Let's be more...
I'm against some stuff she says, to be clear.
There you go. So you can like the video just because she said that. So thanks for watching, guys, and have a good day. Bye.